Hi there. I'm so happy you're here. Your time is precious, and because of that, I want to let you know right away what you'll gain by listening to the very last second of this episode. My conversation with Gwyneth Hagen focused on how we can use patterns in nature as metaphors for more organic, interconnected learning systems that honor both educators and students' natural growth processes. In this bonus episode, with Gwyneth's permission, I read directly from her beautiful Substack microblog called Starting Small. She combines poetry, natural patterns, and educational theory to envision a transformation from what we have now as a factory model to a forest model of education. You'll learn how she uses natural patterns as metaphors for learning and organizational change, what the concept of snail mode is, and how Gwyneth consistently balances academic research with artistic expression, how she uses poetry to bridge the gap between theoretical frameworks and lived experience in education. Stay with me. I'm so happy to have you as a listener today. This is Solutions Coaching and Teaching Strategies, the podcast that extends education beyond the classroom. A show that offers educators and caregivers strategies to try right away and ensure every student receives the inspiration and support they need to thrive. I am Olivia Wall, and I had the privilege of interviewing Gwyneth Hagen for Season 4, Episode 20. And I really think that Gwyneth is on the cutting edge of being a visionary as to where we could go in the future of education. She sees nature's patterns as metaphors for how we can move from a factory model to what she calls a forest model in our educational system. Something that struck me, and it's a reason I gravitate toward Gwyneth as a change maker, I'll call her, is because she really is balancing her artistic life with her world as an educator and consultant and facilitator. And something Gwyneth shared in our conversation was about her Substack called Starting Small, her perspective on poetry and how it can inform our work as a collective, as a think tank. It's so inspiring. And so, with her permission, I had asked if it was okay that I select 4 of her Starting Small Substack entries and read some of her poetry and then share how it inspires me as a coach, as an educator, as a caregiver. And that's exactly what I'm going to do in this bonus episode. As Gwyneth says, this Substack is a design to learn microblog. The entry I want to begin with is from October 21st, and I will make sure to put a link to her Starting Small Substack in the show notes. This piece is called The Joy of Learning from Bubbles, Power in Patterns series. And during our conversation, she did highlight some of nature's patterns, but we didn't talk about bubbles. And what Gwyneth says is that bubbles might be the most joyful pattern in the natural world. We often see patterns in nature as beautiful or functional, which they are, but sometimes they're also kind of delightful. The work of the universe feels serious. It is work that requires structure, rigor, and precision. But when we see bubbles, we know that there's also a role for flexibility, movement, and the unpredictable. When I read this, all I could picture were our boys when they were young and thinking of how much joy they would find in the little container of bubbles that we would get at the grocery store and trying to catch them as they drifted on the wand. And then I also think of the magnificent bubble mixture that we had created where the bubbles would last forever and they would actually encircle the boys when they would use the wand and just make this tube of bubbles around them in the air. And just the laughter and joy that bubbles evoke. And I think we need more of that feeling. And so she goes on, and Gwyneth is using Canva to create her art and pages and capture her words, which is so captivating when you're looking at her Substack. But she speaks to the joy of learning from bubbles, and she outlines action, float, Pop, and then gives beautiful poetic reflections along with a connection to learning theory. So I want to linger here for a moment. Here's how she sees that bubbles reflect action. Gwyneth writes, "Bubbles are flexible spheres formed when a liquid encloses a gas. Bubbles are a pattern that emerges through action. When they gather in mass as a result of movement or agitation, bubbles create foam. Think of a tide rolling in or whitewater rivers. Bubbles are also used by animals for all kinds of purposes, to protect eggs, to hunt, and even as scaffolding for exoskeletons. What can we learn from the action of bubbles? When might action and gathering help us to push our learning forward? How might it create needed change?" Her connection to learning theory, it's interesting since the episode came out. I've had lots of people reaching out via social and emailing. They're excited to learn more about how natural patterns connect to collective efficacy. And so what Gwyneth shares is that collective action theory examines how individuals and groups coordinate their efforts to achieve shared objectives. It explores the conditions under which collective action is possible and successful, and that is Olson's research from 1965. And then Gwyneth, in her most beautiful way, shares a poetic reflection. And so this speaks to bubbles in action. "I am told that whales hunt with nets of bubbles, a thrilling paradox of life for one and death for another. I am told diatoms build cathedrals of self with scaffolds of bubbles. Interesting how flexibility leads to structure. It is good to remember that the foam at the mouth of the sea is not a sign of madness, but of movement." So good. Oh, Gwyneth. And then she moves to float. Due to differences in density and the mediums in which bubbles emerge, we often see them rising, flowing, and floating. They're flexible spheres that seem to be unfazed by obstacles. What can we learn from the flexibility and persistence of bubbles? What do we do when we encounter the unexpected? Do we react and grasp for control? What if we behaved a little bit more like bubbles in the face of the unexpected? Floating and flexing, what might we learn? And here's her connection to learning theory. Mindfulness theory suggests that being aware of new information and perspectives and being open to new ways of thinking can support learning. By fostering curiosity and awareness, learners can approach problems and content from multiple perspectives, enhancing creativity and problem solving. This approach reduces anxiety and rigidity in learning by encouraging flexibility and openness to different interpretations. And that's a quote from Langer, 2014. And get ready, here's her beautiful poetic reflection. "Sometimes poems are ephemeral. Once, I wrote a poem while I was driving. I noticed the sun on the hills, so golden. My poem was a perfect sphere of that moment. Each word floated into place while I drove. Later that day, I remembered the moment and grabbed a pen, but the poem was gone, long ago lost in the current of my thoughts." And lastly, pop. Gwyneth writes, "Bubbles are impermanent by nature. They blink in and out of existence. I suppose there are those rare few frozen in amber, but somehow they just don't feel the same. Finding joy in learning feels similar sometimes, but maybe it's because we need to take a moment to pop a few bubbles. Yes, learning can be challenging, but it can also be celebratory, unexpected, and exciting. Take a moment and pop your own bubbles around what learning is supposed to look like, and consider how it could be." And here's our connection to learning theory. Joyful learning emphasizes the transformative power of joy in education. Positioning that joy is not merely a byproduct of learning, but a means for making the world a better and more equitable place. In her work, Dr. Gholdy Muhammad has studied how joy serves as a powerful catalyst for learning, creativity, and justice. She argues that joy is not just nice to have, but necessary. And here's Gwyneth's beautiful poetic reflection about pop. Joy is a popped bubble. Hear me out. This morning, my pup jumped from the car at middle school drop-off. He zoomed around with such joyous abandon. Half-asleep teens popped their eyes open and cheered. Adults laughed and chased. At that moment, our worries popped out of existence, and we saw the world through new eyes as a place for joy. The next piece I gravitated toward is called In Chaos and Flow. Again, it's Power and Patterns series. It's from July 26, 2024. And I feel like Gwyneth was predicting the future of where we are sitting right now. And she says, does anyone enjoy chaos? It's certainly a term that gives a visceral reaction, but perhaps we can learn to see what sometimes emerges from chaos, the patterns of our own flow. And about chaos, she writes, out of seeming randomness, order forms, yet order always moves toward chaos. Like all paradoxes, we struggle to make sense, see patterns, and seek our control. We wonder, how much choice do we have in the swift currents of our existence? In nature, chaos and emergence are a dance. We notice how the small influences the immense and stand in wonder when immensity crumbles at the smallest touch. There is no explanation other than both are true. And here's her connection to learning theory. Chaos theory deals with the behavior of dynamic systems that are highly sensitive to initial conditions, such as weather systems. While not a learning theory itself, chaos theory can offer insights into the complexity of human behavior and interaction within organizational systems as well. This theory posits that seemingly small actions during initial conditions can have great effects as the system grows in complexity. Similarly, as organizations form, they are extremely sensitive to their initial conditions. In these conditions, the fractals of a leader's behavior grow to form an organizational culture. And it is these initial behaviors that may determine whether learning is encouraged or stifled as the organization grows. This is research from Biswas, Hassan, and Bala, 2018, as well as Marquardt and Schwant in 1999, and Sheen in 2004. And here's Gwyneth's poetic reflection. How strange the attractor, how full the sea, the tide that pulls and forms in me. How lovely the clouds ahead of the storm, like the wind that gusts before it forms. And then there's the juxtaposition of flow. Gwyneth says, in nature, flow patterns occur in water and air currents, but also in the movement of animals. Murmurations of starlings, herds of antelope, and schools of mackerel. Watching flow is mesmerizing, and moving in flow can be all-encompassing. Flow is letting go of time and ego and stepping into your own formation. It feels like losing yourself just a little so you can create something new, something bigger than you. And here's her connection to learning theory. Flow theory describes flow as a state of complete absorption in an activity, where individuals are so focused on the task at hand that they lose track of time and self-consciousness. Flow occurs when the challenges of the activity match the individual's skills, creating a sense of effortless action and deep enjoyment. And this is a quote from Csikszentmihalyi in 1990. And here's Gwyneth's poetic reflection. When I threw myself in the San Juan, I was asked to swim to shore. But like all verbs, to swim presumes so much control. What is the meaning of swim in a river? When we swim in the river, we are at her mercy. She is swiftness and flow and power. The surface tells us nothing of her depth. And we do not know that to swim in a river is to dance with another. And then there's an entry from April 25th of 2024, and it's entitled, How to Start Small When You Are Scared. And Gwyneth's words really hit home. She says, today I will start small. As the brilliant writer and activist Adrienne Murray Brown reminds us, all is small. I've been repeating this mantra a lot lately, mostly because I am afraid of a goal I set this year in my professional and personal life to write more authentically, and to share more boldly. She goes on to say, I've written a lot in life, emails, papers, curriculum, poems. Sometimes it's been hard and sometimes it's been easy, but it has never scared me until now. Now I'm hoping to take a leap and write from a deeply personal place in a largely professional space. Yikes. You can likely predict where my fear is coming from. If you have ever taken a leap, either literal or metaphorical, you know that it is that little voice, the one we all have inside our heads, speaking in the tones of those who have wounded us most. You won't make it. You don't have anything worth saying. You're nothing new. But maybe you, like me, are tired of that voice. And maybe you're learning to ignore it because you have learned that it lies. So is me ignoring it and instead taking very seriously the wisdom of an iconic quote from one of my favorite books. And this quote is Frank Herbert from Dune. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings total obliteration. I will face my fear. I will permit it to pass over me and through me, and when it has gone past, I will turn the inner eye to see its path. Where the fear is gone, there will be nothing. Only I will remain. And Gwyneth goes on, if you are a learner like me, permitting fear to pass through you so that you may meet your path, a more human path in your work and professional learning, I invite you to join me. And lastly, one of my favorite pieces I've read, it's from January 21st, 2025, and it's called Snail Mode, Acceptance and Emergence. And this resonated because so many of the educators and caregivers that I have in my life are finding their footing in this new year of 2025. And what Gwyneth speaks to that she's going through, I think will really resonate with you. And here's what she says. Sometimes we feel guilty for seeking solace. I'm not talking about the heroic kind of solace we imagine when we first hear this word, a solitary person meditating on a rock by the ocean, or a single figure hiking through the towering forest. No, I'm talking about a darker side of solace, the kind of solace taken when the world is just too much, the kind of solace that comes from retracting inward, sometimes literally. A few months back, I felt myself beginning my annual retraction. At first, I fought it. Walking with my glasses off my face toward the sun in the morning, I opened my eyes wide and prayed to the sun, fill me, inoculate me. I did this for a few weeks, starting in November. But then, inevitably, I felt a smooth pull of self curling inward, towards a dark center. I felt the familiar paradox of tight clenching and completely inert motivation that comes as the world begins to take on a different ombre. My winter was here. And this is where the guilt comes in. Because if you stay in bed sick, you can forgive yourself. But if you stay in bed sad, it is a little harder. But this year, I wasn't surprised by my retraction. This year, I had given myself the gift of poetry. And something magical happened. Not magical happiness or motivation or even optimism, but magical acceptance. My poetry gave me the words I needed to accept and name that I was officially in my snail mode, and that I could emerge and retract, and somehow it was perfectly natural and maybe even a little beautiful. So this is me, emerging for a bit to share a poem and a few updates below. I hope you enjoy it. But if you're in snail mode too, don't worry. Someday we'll both peek our heads out at the same time, give each other a knowing look, and allow ourselves to be a little vulnerable and briefly seen. And here's Gwyneth's beautiful poem that I'll leave you with. First, the poem. Yesterday I was awoken, gripped by an electric hand. I retracted into the spiral of myself. I went into snail mode. that is what I've decided to call it. When your world shrinks to the size of your room, a bed, it sounds cuter than briefly overcome by seasonal depression. Less worrisome. Everyone knows that the snail will emerge eventually. And I did. Emerge. One slow eye at a time. To know Gwyneth Hagen is a gift, and her vision for where we can go in education is so hopeful, and that's what I'm going to hold on to. I think it's okay when we go into snail mode, as Gwyneth calls it, and I think we also have lots of work to do. I look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you for joining and listening to this bonus episode today. Take care. Scholutions Coaching and Teaching Strategies is created, produced, and edited by me, Olivia Wall. Thank you to my older son, Benjamin, who created the music playing in the background. You can follow and listen to Scholutions wherever you get your podcasts, or subscribe to never miss an episode and watch on YouTube. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Send me an email at scholutionspodcast@gmail.com. Let me know which of Gwyneth's microblog entries you are excited to use as inspiration and share with others. Tune in every Monday for the best research about coaching and teaching strategies you can apply right away to better the lives of the children in your care. And stay tuned for my bonus episodes every Friday, where I'll share how I applied what I learned from the guests in schools that week. See you then.